What is up, my friends and fellow busybees? Now, I'm not gonna lie, things have been pretty busy around here lately as I get ready for some upcoming launches that I will discuss one of them later on in this episode, but I didn't really have as much time to sit down and prep out an episode in the way that I normally do, so I'm just sitting down, I got my cup of coffee here, and I thought I would just chat a little bit. It is now coming up on, which is so crazy, a full year of doing this full time, working in my furniture refinishing business and being a full-time small business owner and content creator and content entrepreneur. And it's just over 3 years now that I've been doing furniture makeovers and learning everything that there is to learn in this business and side hustling and everything. And I just took a moment and I was reflecting back. And I've done a podcast episode on this before with some lessons that I've learned, but I wanted to talk today about some things that I wish I had done sooner in my furniture refinishing business or side hustle, because I think it's kind of only once you get further on and you see how impactful those things actually are that you can look back and be like, oh shit, I really should have done that sooner. So as always, because I like to bring you my lessons learned and things that I fuck up on along the way so that you can avoid those for yourself and your side hustle and businesses, I have 5 things that I really wish I had just pulled the trigger on and addressed far earlier in my journey that would have ultimately saved me a lot of time and effort down the line. So the first thing that I wish I did sooner was raising my prices for my refinished furniture that I was selling. The reality is, when I first started out, I wasn't very in tune with this space. I didn't know a lot of people, especially within my local market, that were doing furniture painting and refinishing more than just slapping some paint on something willy-nilly and having it look like crap and then trying to get money from it. I just didn't know what was normal to expect. I had no idea what a price range would be. I really only knew what actual furniture retailers were selling their things for. And to be honest, my kind of threshold or thing that I would look at to figure out my prices at first was how much would IKEA sell it for? And then I would sell it for less than that because I was well, that would be a deal. You could drive across the city and go get it from IKEA, or you could stay closer to home, save a little money and get it from me, was essentially the mentality. And I was looking at the cost of the things that I was using and the cost of the price of the units that I was sourcing. But at that time, they were largely free or under $20 for sure. So that didn't play as huge of a factor into everything. And I definitely wasn't looking at my time spent on the pieces because it was really just my escape and a time filler for me at the beginning. During the pandemic, when we were in lockdown and literally couldn't fucking leave our homes. Do you remember that? That was horrible. What a brutal time. But I had this escape in the garage and this thing that could eat up hours and hours of my time, and I wasn't rushing it, and I was listening to podcasts or music, and I was just enjoying the experience. So if I was paying myself for my time, I would have been probably charging too much. But these weren't even thoughts that were going through my head. I was literally could you get it at IKEA for more expensive? Perfect. Somebody will want to buy it. And while that was fine at first to get me those first few clients, get the pieces sold, and so I could work on more pieces to really fine-tune my craft, and simultaneously, I was getting involved in the furniture refinishing community on Instagram and searching up tutorials on YouTube and just learning a lot more and thus resulting in a better product as I went on. It took much longer than it probably should have for me to raise my prices to something that was up to par with the market and also that was paying me an amount that was worth the time and effort and energy that I was putting in. Even if it wasn't a full-time thing or an official business at that point, the reality was I had eventually learned a ton of information from hours and hours of research and learning from other people and looking up questions and asking professionals and all these things that are skill sets that we really do need to value. And I had much more experience from having, dozens of pieces that I had worked on at that point. And I was raising my prices marginally as I went up, but I really should have done some bigger jumps, especially after looking at what other people in my general area were charging for those kinds of things. And there's always the caveat of you don't really know the quality of the work, you don't know how much experience that person is bringing. A lot of people started refinishing furniture during the pandemic, so a lot of people were probably just as new as I was. And you can't always really tell with photos on Marketplace and stuff. Like, people are crafty in the way that they hide the imperfections. So comparing yourself to others can be a difficult task when you're trying to figure out how to match up your prices. But I wish that I sooner had raised them, maybe even higher than they would have sold for. And then I would know what that threshold was so that I could take that into account as I listed further items and kind of figured out what that sweet spot was for what I could get for what I was producing. When we first start out, we really don't, for the most part, I think, have that confidence in our abilities and in our skills and in what the market will accept. And so we just go in really meager and meekly and charge pennies relative to what we should be probably charging. And I don't think it helps us out. That's not a good way for us to build our confidence in our abilities. And it also sets a precedent for everybody else that's trying to do this. I think back, or I should say, I know now how annoyed I am when I see people really undercutting prices, and people who I can tell are trying to really make this a side hustle and a business for themselves too in our general area, but they're just selling their pieces for so little, and they look nice. They're good pieces, I'm sure. But that then sets a precedent for people who are seeing that and thinking that that's a normal piece to be charging, or a normal price to be charging for those pieces. So I think I've said it here before, but it really just undercuts the value of the profession, of the whatever you want to call this thing that we do as a whole when you come in so low with the prices. Because if someone's going to look and see a tallboy dresser and a nightstand that look great and they're being sold for $100 for the set, well then if I list a tallboy dresser and a nightstand for $650, the same person looking at those two listings is going to, at a glance, assume that they are of the same quality, if they're the same measurements and all those other things, and both work well in their home. They're going to obviously choose the $100 one, and I wouldn't hold that against them. I would do the same thing if I was the buyer. But you can see how eventually that kind of sets a precedent for people to be expecting that amount from everyone. And then if you come in with a much more realistic amount to be charging for a piece of furniture that's solid wood and has all these finishes and whatever, then people aren't really going to understand that that's normal. So for my own confidence, for my own knowledge that I can sell things for that amount for myself, for the market as a whole, I really do wish I had raised my prices higher much sooner. And if you've been nervous about raising your prices, I recommend you do the same. I have an episode, I think it's actually the next episode coming out, because I do pre-plan some stuff. I gotta get prepared for the busy times, you guys. And it is a Busybees in Business strategy session with Lindsay, who is talking about this exact same thing, about her, I was going to say unwillingness, but lack of confidence in raising her prices and just knowing what to put the prices at and how to know that that is a normal price for your area. So we talk about that in more detail. So you can stay tuned for next week's episode if you're interested in hearing more about that. The next thing I wish I did sooner in my furniture refinishing business, side hustle, even in my hobby, honestly, was not hoarding so many pieces. Guys, I have so many pieces. I still do it a little bit. I try so hard not to. But the thing with this work is you probably got into it because you wanted to save furniture from ending up in the landfill. And reality check, there's a lot of furniture going to the landfill. And unfortunately, we just can't save them all. Unless you have a very large garage or some other warehouse of some sort, and in which case I am very jealous of you. Because there are so many pieces that I see that are great quality, that are a very affordable price, or even just on the curb on garbage day, and I'm like, I want to take it so bad, but I can't. I have no space. And the reality is I was hoarding pieces and I was taking almost anything, and especially when people would reach out to me with pieces that they were going to be throwing out, like friends and family or people, eventually followers from social media who lived in my area. They would say, I have this piece I was going to throw, but I thought I would check with you first. And I'm sure there was no obligation on either end to take the thing. They were just being kind and reaching out. But I appreciated it so much that I almost always was saying, absolutely, thank you so much. When can I come get it? Or whatever. And over time, I've gotten much more intentional with the things that I take in, being aware of any repairs that might be needed, how long the pieces will take, if it's worth my while, if I know I'm just going to get discouraged halfway through and put it in the back of the garage and it's going to sit there for 6 months, then I'm going to try and stay away from those pieces because I have enough of those already. But it was so easy to hoard these pieces, and then what did that do? That took away from my space to work because I'm going to stop using the word hoard. I have pieces that I store in my garage, which doubles as my workshop, and it's a single car garage. It's not big. It's very impressive what I fit in there, if I do say so myself, but there's not a whole lot of space. So I got really good at Tetris, which was a plus, but I was just stacking these pieces in there, and that gave me very little space to move around and actually work on the pieces that I was trying to work on. So particularly in the winter when I can't utilize my driveway space, that was really restrictive in how many pieces that I could put out because I could pretty much only work on one piece at a time unless I moved things into the living room and the dining room area, which, my husband was only cool with for so long because, we need some sort of living space, I suppose. I suppose that's a reasonable request. So I had to put a curb on it. And you probably do too, because I know this is a very common thing in the furniture refinisher community. We find it so hard to say no, but it restricts our area. And then also, I've now realized, now that I've kind of worked through some of that backlog and finished up some of the pieces that were sitting kind of like half done, but still sitting in my workshop area, once I've been able to clear some of that space out, I realized that the cluttered nature of everything was really cluttering my mind and my plan or vision forward to clear things out, because there was so much that I essentially wasn't able to make a clear plan to get through it all, even once I had finished or curbed bringing in new pieces. So now that I have a little bit more space in there and I can kind of see the walls a little bit better, it's definitely not perfect. And in a perfect world, I would love to be able to get a couple pieces that I have sitting, still kind of have done. I have to create a couple tops, which I'm totally procrastinating on. But if I could get a few of those out, I would love to pull everything out of the garage, give it a nice sweep the walls like there's dust and shit everywhere, clean it out, and then set it up much better and use the space a lot more efficiently, and then have, separate spaces where I can have a little bit of inventory sitting that I'll be working on, and then having a big clear open space where I can be doing the makeovers. But all that to say, when I stopped hoarding the pieces, when I stopped bringing so much in, I was able to create a plan, create some clarity, have a lot more just brain space available to me to deal with what I was working on. Because for me, if I can see that there's the mess and the disorganization around me, there's at least a little bit of my brain that's always thinking about that and wanting to stop what I'm currently doing and address that so that it's clean and tidy and I know where everything is before I do the thing that I'm working on. But the reality is, if I'm trying to create income for myself, cleaning and reorganizing my space constantly is nobody's gonna pay me for that, unfortunately. But curbing that, maybe if it helps to give you a tangible number that you're allowing yourself to bring in each month, or you have to maybe finish 2 pieces and sell the 2 pieces before you're able to bring a new one in, or something like that. That is just a system and it's a random number that you chose and you made up, and nobody's going to hold you to it other than yourself. But I find for me, if I create those kind of rules and restrictions, it really helps me to stick to those things, because when I'm at the thrift store and I see a really awesome piece for a really awesome price and I immediately have a vision for that piece, it's really easy for me to convince myself that there are less pieces sitting in my garage waiting for my time and attention than there actually are. And again, just be okay with letting pieces go and trusting that there's so many other pieces that just inevitably will come your way that will be just as great, if not greater, than the one that you've just currently found, and not having that scarcity mentality of I have to take everything as it comes because what if it stops coming one day? Honey, they're making so much furniture every single day. Not as nice as the old stuff, but the old stuff's still around, and these pieces that are being refinished today and taken by people today, in a year's time could be sold again. Or there'll be other ones that are then on their last legs that are ready to be refinished and restored. So I wouldn't stress yourself out over it. The third thing I wish I did sooner in my side hustle and business was focused on marketing and just really thought about it a little bit more intentionally, because to be honest, it was never something I thought of until probably like the last 6 months. And if you have no idea how to tackle marketing your side hustle or business, don't worry, you are not alone. I hear this all the time from people. It's a really common piece of feedback that I hear in the space. People don't know how to get their name out there and in front of the right people who would be interested in purchasing their products or their services. This is why this is something that I'm going to be tackling and teaching in my upcoming free Furniture Refinishers Bootcamp, 2 weeks to launch your side hustle, and you're not going to want to miss it. Starting June 19th, over the span of 2 weeks, I'm going to be teaching and providing support to a group of people who are eager and interested in finally getting that side hustle launched. I'm going to be covering all you need to know about getting things set up and the official channels that you need to look into, getting seen, and thinking about the ways to market your side hustle. I have a 3-pronged approach that will really help to get the reach that you've been looking for. And getting a grip and discussing embodying the confidence, the positivity, and the mindset that you need to be a business owner and a side hustler, and a successful one at that. So if you'd like to join me in the bootcamp, which starts next week, and I could not be more excited, that's one of the launches I was speaking about that I've been prepping for, you can click the link in the show notes of this episode or head to meldiditherself.ca/bootcamp to register, and I will see you guys there. I can't wait. But I really do wish that I had started sooner focusing on marketing, because you can rely on getting a lucky break or having word of mouth happen organically, or the right people finding you on social media or finding your website and things like that. But the reality is, if you have a strategic, intentional approach that you're monitoring and you're evaluating on a regular basis, that's going to reap much more benefit to you and to your business than just letting things happen and seeing what comes from it. I find that the longer we go past the pandemic, the more online businesses there really are. So the more competition is out there, quote unquote competition. There's just more to filter through, I guess is the word. And so you really do want you and your business to be at the forefront, easily findable, easily searchable. You don't want there to be any barriers between somebody hearing about you and being able to find out everything they need to about you and your world. Or if they're searching for somebody doing what you do, you want it to be really easy and obvious that you are the right choice to be making. So while I do feel super lucky and happy and excited that I've been able to get the reach across my social media platforms and my website and things like that just organically, I've never put $1 behind any marketing that I've ever done for anything on anything. I do think if you have an intentional approach, even if it's not a paid approach, I think it's very possible to do this effectively and not have to pay a single dollar. But you do need that intentionality, and you need to book it into your calendar to do, because it's a really easy thing to put off because you don't necessarily know if there will be a benefit that comes from it before you do it. So it can seem like a nice to do, but not a need to do. But I'm here to say I really do wish I had focused on it sooner, so you should make it a need to do. And again, if you want some support in figuring this out and knowing the beginning steps of what you can do and what you maybe had missed out on when you first started your side hustle, then I recommend you join me in the bootcamp, because I will be outlining some of those important high-level points. Another thing I wish I did sooner, although I did do it pretty early on, which is such a blessing. I'm so glad I had the foresight to see this, but I didn't do it like day one, and ideally you want to do it day one, is implementing a tax and expenses and bookkeeping system so that you are prepared and knowledgeable and ready for tax time. I always say this, but the reality is nobody really likes doing taxes. Maybe some people, honestly, probably no one. I was going to say maybe accountants, but accountants probably hate tax time the most because they're so busy. So no one loves it. This is one thing that I recommend, I think, is a really useful thing to find a paid service for. Doesn't need to cost a lot. I've talked on many occasions about the software that I use called QuickBooks Self-Employed. I think it's $14 a month. That is a very worthwhile investment for me for the peace of mind that it brought, because it is specific to Canadian taxes. Like it knows where I am and basically knows what the CRA, which is our tax revenue agency, whatever, it knows what it needs, it knows its regulations and stuff, and it gives me that information so that I can be tracking everything accurately, so I'm not having to go through and redo things or double check. So the first year that I did it, I filed my taxes on my own, and it was fine and easy because of QuickBooks. This past year, we used an accountant because we had just a lot going on with our taxes and changing employment and investments and whatever. So we sent everything to an accountant, I just included this business stuff because might as well. And everything was done correctly. He had no recommendations for changing anything, any improvements. The guidance that I got through the software was perfect. So it just takes so much stress away of tax time. Anyways, if you don't have one of those systems set up early on, when it comes to be tax time, it's going to be a headache. You're going to be going back, looking through all your shit, trying to figure out what was business related, what did I buy when I went to the Home Depot that time, like blah, blah, blah. And God forbid you get audited and you don't have those things set up ahead of time. I just can't say it enough. I just recommend, you just need it. You just need it. It's something that you can't miss before you spend time dedicating to a website, to growing your social media, to anything. It just really should just be the first thing that you do. So I don't know what more I can say than that. I did do a whole episode on the tax software that I use and how I use it and what it tracks for me and things like that. So if you just don't really know what goes into a system like that and you are interested in listening to that, that was episode 36. It's called Tackling Tax Time in Your Furniture Painting and Refinishing Business. And I go into detail on everything with QuickBooks Self-Employed, so you can check that out if you're interested. And then the last thing that I wish I had set up sooner in my business or side hustle also kind of links to that same thing that will make it really difficult to go back and search through all your expenses that you're trying to track for tax time, is I wish I had sooner set up a separate business bank account and credit card. Again, this is one of the things I would do right out of the bat, right when you start up that business. It's probably in every single fucking small business guide ever, but I just had so much going on and I just was like, I'll just do it next week. And then I said, I'll do that the next week. And then I'll do it the next week. And it just took way longer than it should have. I wanted to make sure I got the right one that would suit all of my needs and be the cheapest and da-da-da. And that just ended up making me wait way too long, when the reality is they're all very similar. There's a couple that are better than others in terms of fees and stuff like that, but just get one, get it set up, and it makes it so much easier, not only because everything is separate for tracking your expenses and your income and all that stuff, so you have it in one spot so you can easily see if you have missed something that you haven't put into your tax software. It also gives you a really good idea of how much money you have coming in and going out when you are buying supplies and pieces to work on and these different subscriptions and stuff like that. You have everything in one place. You can see tangibly if you are spending more than you are making, which can be also a really good indicator that you should raise your prices of your pieces, and might kind of incite you to do so quicker because you have that very apparent number in front of you that's showing you that you are not charging enough. For some people who need logical evidence, that will be a really good indicator. And if you don't do it from the get-go and you start setting these things up and spending money here and there and buying apps and stuff, it's so annoying to go back and try to figure out what is still being charged to your personal credit card or account and having to go into the payment options and switch it over. That took way longer than it needed to if I had just started it correctly in the first place. So I highly recommend get a business bank account. They'll usually recommend a credit card when you do so. Obviously, try and keep it cheap if you can, especially if you have limited income coming in right now. Look into if there are any incentives, sometimes for bank accounts, if you keep a certain amount of money in it consistently each month, then they'll waive the monthly fee for the account. It's also important to look at the transaction limits and the withdrawals and how many you can do a month and things like that, because that can result in additional service charges. Keep in mind that these account fees and stuff like that are also expenses that you can then track and report at tax time. So, I always say it all comes out in the wash, but it's all factored in the grand scheme of things of your expenses relative to your income. Try and make a smart move, but don't take too much time researching and going back and forth, but do it sooner than later. This is valuable information that I'm giving you that's going to save you time, energy, and effort and money. Please listen to me, please, and thank you. Oh yeah, but also this is not official tax or legal advice, la la la. But just do it. Okay, and something that you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They always get me fired up, and so I keep a list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I end every podcast episode with one that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is: listen with the same passion you have for being heard. And this one's maybe a little self-indulgent because I'm essentially telling you to listen to me and what I'm saying, but just more broadly, make sure you're listening with the same passion you have for being heard. This is going to help you learn so much more. This will help you learn from other people's mistakes, and this will help you to just authentically and actively hear what people are saying. I think so often we can, whether we're in conversation just with people in our lives or we're talking with professionals who are trained and we're consulting with on our businesses, or even when we're working with clients ourselves, like me as a coach and consultant, we can get so caught up in what the person said before and what we want to say next, or as a rebuttal to that thing, or maybe we get defensive and we want to prove ourselves to them, or we just have a point in general that we want to make, and then we can get in our own heads and stuck on that one thing of I want to say this, I can't wait to say this, and we're just waiting for the person to stop talking so we can have our space. Well, hopefully you're waiting. Don't interrupt people. You should at least be waiting. But we could just be waiting to say that one thing, and we're not actually stopping and thinking and listening and taking in what the person is saying to us because we have such a passion for being heard and being right and being smart and being the best and being insert positive attribute here, that we can get caught up. And that's how we get to be not really enjoyable people to be around, because nobody wants to talk to someone who's just always trying to talk about themselves, or when you know that someone's not really listening to you. Because I think we've probably all been in conversations where you can tell that the person's just waiting till you're done speaking to say something that's either completely irrelevant to the conversation that you're currently having, or was something from way before that that in their head they're just sitting like a little dog waiting to jump on its food. So my recommendation as you move forward this week would be to listen with the same passion that you have for being heard. Be intentional about reminding yourself to stop, get out of your own head and thinking about what to say, and put that effort instead in listening to what the person in front of you is actually saying, and not just the words they're saying, how they're saying it, their tone, their body language, all these things that can really get you more in tune with what they're actually trying to convey to you. And I think it's so much more effective for having deeper conversations, understanding each other better, being empathetic and attuned to the people around us, having really great communication with our partners or with our family, with our children, because often we're not actually saying what we want to say, but we're giving a lot of clues as to what message we want to get across. And if you're taking the time to really notice those things and really be intentional with being open to going in different directions in the conversation based on what you're observing, you're going to learn so much more about that person. You're going to have such a stronger relationship with that person. So that's my challenge to you this week. Be intentional and listen with the same passion that you have for being heard, and let me know how it goes. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time. I hope to see you in the boot camp along with me next week. That's MelDidItHerself.ca/bootcamp, and I will see you guys next week.